In this video, I'm going to show you how to move to a different backdrop and show a different character when that happens. So as you can see, we're using some of the characters from the Netflix series Wednesday. Hey everyone, it's Mr. G, and this video is going to be a fun one because I'm going to answer Shoba's question, which was, what can we do if we have to add different sprites on different backdrops? So this might be a long video because it's going to incorporate a lot of different concepts, but it should be fun to go through, and the finished product will hopefully be cool. I'm going to describe what we're going to try to create first. So I'm going to have 3 different backdrops. The center backdrop, or the starting backdrop, is going to be Nevermore. And we're going to have a character, a sprite, that when it moves all the way to the left, it switches the backdrop and it encounters new characters. So when the backdrop switches, we're going to have new characters show up. And then when the sprite goes back to the middle, back to Nevermore, and goes to the other side, we're going to see another backdrop and different characters show up there too. So that's the main idea, or the theory behind what we're about to create. So now all that's left is to actually get started and code. So I'm going to start from absolute scratch, which means that I'm going to get rid of the cat sprite, and I'm going to import my own sprite, which I downloaded just a few minutes ago. And this is going to be Thing. So Thing is going to be our main sprite here. So for anyone that's watching the Netflix series Wednesday, it's actually really good. I'm not done yet, but I'm enjoying it. But Thing is going to be our main character, and we're going to have Thing start in Nevermore. So I'm going to add that backdrop as the main backdrop when the project starts. Now I see that the backdrop doesn't fill in the entire stage, so let me convert it to vector and actually stretch it out a little bit. That looks much better. If you look over here on the stage, it looks much better on the right side. Okay, so that's one backdrop. But like I mentioned before, we're going to have a left and a right side. So, or left and right backdrop. So we're going to have to add a couple more backdrops. So let us add let's go with Castle 2 for the left backdrop. And we're going to add one more backdrop. Let me pick something that looks kind of related to the show. Let's see. Oh, let's go with the woods. That should work. All right, so we have the woods, we have Castle 2, and we have Nevermore. So now I'm going to just delete this blank backdrop because we don't need it anymore. And I'm going to add some code to the backdrop, or to the stage area. And what I want to add is when the green flag is clicked, I want to make sure that we always start on this backdrop. So let me go over to Events, and when the green flag is clicked, we're going to make sure that we switch to Nevermore. So no matter what, no matter which backdrop we're on, when we click on the green flag, we're going to start at Nevermore. Okay, so that's our starting backdrop, and then we'll switch to the other 2 backdrops with code in a little bit. Now I want Thing to be able to move around. So as you might have seen, I just grabbed him and moved him around, and that kind of highlights him. So I want to give him the ability to move around. So let's go to Events and let's detect some key presses. So we're going to go with left and right, when left arrow is pressed and when the right arrow is pressed. Where's the right? There it is. Okay, I'm just going to use those 2 commands, but if you want to enhance it and make them, give them the ability to go up and down, that's perfectly fine too. But for this project, and just to demonstrate how to switch backdrops and have different characters in the different backdrops, I'm just going to have Thing go left and right. So Thing is going to start right there in the middle. And if we click on the left arrow, we're going to change his X position. So we're going to change X by -10. And when the right arrow key is pressed, we're going to change X by 10. So now I should be able to move Thing left and right. And you'll notice that he's like facing the same direction. We could fix that later on. Maybe I'll touch up the costumes and stuff a little bit later. But for now, it's not so important. Okay? Okay, so next thing I want to do is I want to be able to switch to a different backdrop. So what I'm thinking is that when thing moves all the way to the left, once he crosses or once his X position is greater than a certain value, I want to switch the backdrop. So I think when thing is, let's see, how far should he go? When he's about there. So as you might be noticing that the X position or the X value is shown down here in the bottom right. So that's where I'm gonna get the number that I want. So I'll say once he's less than negative 200, let's say negative 245, that's when we should switch the backdrop. Okay, so what I can do is I'm gonna have to create a condition here to see what his X position is at any point in time. Okay, so if his X position is less than negative 245, so I just grabbed this green operator, and what I also have to do is I have to detect his X position, which is in the motion palette. And what I'll do is I'll see if the X position is less than 245. And if it is, then we're going to send out a broadcast. We're going to send out a message to change the backdrop. Okay, so that is the X position. Let me start creating this condition. So if the X position is less than 245, then we want to send out a message, go to the castle, let's say. So we're going to go to events and we're going to create a broadcast message. Let me not connect it there yet. Let's make this message go to castle. Okay. And now if we think about the other side, when thing goes, let's say like greater than 245 or greater than, let's say 235. So we have to make sure that we start creating that condition. If thing's X position is greater than 245, or let's say 235, because it looks a little different on this side. First, let me get his X position, which is in the motion palette. Then I want to broadcast go to the woods. So we're going to create this event. And I'm going to click new message, and we're going to call this go to the woods. Okay, so now we have two conditions. They're not connected to anything. So right now they're not really going to do much. But we can start. This is a good start because once we broadcast a message, then we can switch the backdrop. So that is actually what I'm going to do. I'm going to go back to the stage and I'm going to detect these events. So when the message gets broadcast, we can receive that event. So one is going to be go to the castle, and then the other event is go to the woods. So our stage is going to be listening for these two events that we just created. Actually, it's going to be listening for three events because it's also going to be listening to see when the green flag is clicked. But when we receive go to castle, what I want to do is I want to switch the backdrop. So if we go over to the looks palette, we want to switch the backdrop to the castle. So I just changed it to castle 2. And when we receive go to the woods, we are going to switch the backdrop to the woods. Okay, so that's perfect. So no matter where we end up, when I click on the green flag, we're going to be at Nevermore. And when we receive go to castle, when we receive that event or we hear it, we're going to switch to the castle. And when we hear the go to the woods event, we're going to switch to the woods. So now what I want to do is I want to broadcast those events. So I want to connect my conditionals to the actual left and right clicks. Let me zoom out just a little bit. The only way I'm going to get to the left side, or the only way or the only reason I should have to hear this event, go to castle, would be if I'm clicking the left arrow. So I'm going to connect this conditional right there underneath the left arrow key. So what's going to happen is if I keep clicking the left arrow, the character is going to move over to the left 10 pixels at a time because we're going -10. And then once it detects that we have gone past -245 on the x-axis, then it's going to broadcast that message, go to castle. The castle should hear that, sorry, the backdrop should hear that, or the stage should hear that, and then switch the backdrop. So let's test it out. So I should be able to go all the way to the left. And there we go. We can see that we are at the castle now. Now to reset, I'm going to click on the green flag. But before I do, I want to make sure that thing goes back to the center when we click on the green flag. So I'm going to click on the green flag first. And I'm going to drag thing over to the middle. So thing is right there in the middle. And thing, when he hears that the green flag was clicked, I want to make sure that he goes to, let's say 0 on the x-axis and -70 on the y-axis. So I can click on this and see where he ends up. And that is the center position. Okay, so that is good so far. But now I have to connect the conditional to the right. So if I move thing all the way to the right, there we go. We should be able to switch over to the woods now. So I'm going to keep clicking the right arrow key, and then eventually thing will move over to that new backdrop. Okay. Now something you might have noticed is now thing is on the right side when he should be on the left. Because if we move from one area to the next, we should end up on the left side. And this is something that I showed in my other video on moving between scenes. So definitely check that out to see how to fix it. But for now, I think we're okay. For now, we're just going to leave it like this and think about what we want to do next. And I'll fix that in a little bit. So what I really want to do is I want to bring in new characters when the stage or the backdrop changes. And that's like the crux of what Shoba was asking. How do we show different characters in different backdrops? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to import some new characters here. So let us, first let me change the backdrop just so I know where I want to be. I'm going to just go to the castle. I'm going to move thing over here to the side for a second. And I want, let's say I want Wednesday to be here on the left. So I'm going to import that image, and Wednesday's over here, and actually Wednesday already has thing on her shoulder, so that's kind of silly, but that's the picture I used or I downloaded, so we're going to use that. And now we are in Wednesday, and Wednesday doesn't have any code right now, as you can see here in the middle, so we need to add some code for her. And here is where the magic will happen. When the green flag is clicked, Wednesday should not be showing. So I'm going to show you how to implement that. We're going to go over to events, and we're going to bring in when green flag is clicked. And when that happens, when the green flag is clicked, Wednesday is going to hide. We're going to make sure that she is hidden. She's not showing up no matter what happens. Okay, as soon as that green flag is clicked, she's hidden. The other thing I want to do is I want to make sure that when we go to the castle, when we receive that event, which I created a few minutes ago. So when I receive go to castle, that's when Wednesday should show up. So I'm going to go back to my looks palette, and I'm going to show her right now. Okay, so we can test this out and just make sure that this works. When I click on the green flag, we reset all of the positions, we reset the backdrop to Nevermore, and now the hand or thing, when he moves all the way to the left and switches to the other backdrop, that's when this character Wednesday should show up. And now you see that thing is kind of behind Wednesday. So I do want to fix that actually. And I have to fix that inside of thing's code. So thing, even though he's the one that's broadcasting this message go to castle, he can also receive that message. So when he receives go to castle, I'm just going to bring him over to the right side over here. Okay, so I already moved him over, so I can just bring in the go-to block and put him in the right position that I want him to be at, which let's just say it's right there. Okay, so when thing receives that message, we should be able to test this out once again. Click on the green flag, I move thing over, and then he shows up in this new area, and there's Wednesday hanging out or just chilling there. Okay, so let's go over to the other side. Let's see. Oh, go to the woods. So we are gonna switch over to the woods. I'm just gonna change the backdrop so that it's easier for my brain to process what's going on. When we go to the woods, things should be over here on the left side because he moved all the way to the right in Nevermore. And when thing ends up in this backdrop, I want him to meet up with Enid. So let me choose a sprite. Let me upload the sprite, I should say. And we're gonna bring in Enid. And let's see how she's doing over here. And we're gonna put her over here in the bottom right of this backdrop. So Enid is just hanging out here in the woods. So we are gonna make sure that she only shows up when thing goes to the woods. So when this message gets broadcast, when thing moves over to the right, we're gonna broadcast the message, go to the woods. And Enid, as you can see, her sprite is the active sprite right now. You could see the little character right there. When she receives that message, she's going to show up. So she is going to show when that is the case. So I can test this out. Right now I'm going to test it out by clicking on the green flag. And when I click on it, you might notice that Enid is there. And we don't want her to be there. So we have to add the code to hide her when the green flag is clicked. So when the green flag is clicked, I want Enid to hide. And the hide block is in the looks palette. There we go. So we can test this out again. I'm going to click on the green flag. Enid disappears because she's supposed to hide, as you can see in the code. And when thing moves all the way to the right, he shows up. Actually, right now he's behind Enid, but Enid shows up in this different backdrop, which is exactly what we want. So I just want to make sure that thing, when he receives that message, so even though he's the one that's sending the message, go to the woods, when he receives that, when I receive go to the woods, even he moves to the correct position. So I want to make sure that thing is all the way over here on the right, on the left side. So I moved him over here, and I am going to use the motion block go to, and that is the position that he's going to end up at. Okay, so with that, I think we've accomplished what Shoba was trying to accomplish, or what she was asking in the question. Let me just click go, and let's test this out. So when we move thing all the way to the left, you see Wednesday shows up. Let me click on the green flag and move thing all the way to the right. And we should be in a new backdrop, and there is Enid. Okay, so now I think that's good enough for now. So if that was what you were trying to accomplish, this is great. You could stop watching the video at this point. But now I'm going to actually go a little bit further and maybe add some extras and have the characters say something. And maybe have the character, the actual hand look like he's facing in the correct direction. So everything I'm going to do from now on is going to be extra, but if this helps you out, feel free to stop watching at this point, because I think we've captured the essence of the question so far. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I want to actually be able to go back to Nevermore. So right now, thing can just keep moving left and right, but actually now that I think about it, we're going to have a pretty bad bug over here, because if thing moves all the way to the left here, he's going to end up skipping Nevermore and going to the castle area, because we're only checking to see if the X position of thing is less than negative 245 on the X-axis. So let's see if that happens. Yep, he goes right over to the castle area. So we can see this is a huge bug, but it shouldn't be too bad to fix. What we'll do is we'll make sure that we're only checking to see if thing is greater than or less than on the X-axis, but making sure that that can only happen when he's at Nevermore. So let me click on the green flag to kind of reset everything. And let me go back to my code here. Okay, so when the left arrow key is pressed, we want to make sure we only broadcast this message, go to castle, if the backdrop is also Nevermore. So we have to create another kind of conditional here, or we have to add to our conditional statement here. we want to make sure that his X position is less than negative 245. And, so let me go over to the operators palette. And we want to make sure that the current backdrop is nevermore. So how do I do that? Let me see if I can detect what the current backdrop is with looks. And I can. We see in looks here, there is a backdrop block. And if the backdrop name equals nevermore, so we're going to have to grab another operator here. And if the backdrop name equals nevermore, that's when we should, that's the only time we should go to the castle. Okay, so I'm going to add that to our conditional, and I can just, I mean, I should make sure that nevermore is the name of the backdrop. So yes, it is. You can see it's all lowercase and all one word. And then the other two are going to be castle 2 and then woods. So I'm going to have to be careful with those as well. But let's go back over to thing. Let me connect my, my conditional there, or my condition, and put it inside my conditional. So now when we move all the way to the left, even if we're in the woods, it's not going to switch over to nevermore. That can't happen because we need to be in nevermore for this to be true. So both of these sides have to be true in order for the entire thing to be true. And we're going to do the same thing with the right arrow. So we're going to make sure that the position is greater than 235 and the backdrop name is equal to nevermore. So I'm going to bring in the equals operator here. I'm going to make sure that my backdrop, if I go to the looks palette, I'm going to make sure that the backdrop name, not the number, but the name is equal to nevermore. And that is going to be my conditional. Okay? So that's the only time this could happen. So we can only go left and right if we're starting from nevermore. So let me click on the green flag. I'm going to go over to the left side. There we go. And so even if I go all the way to the left, it's not really going to do much. I think it's going to, yeah, he's not going to do anything because he is stuck here because we are not in nevermore. We're only checking to see the positions if we are at nevermore. Okay, so, I mean, now that I think about it, we're also going to have to create a conditional for moving to the right and going back to nevermore. But let's fix that in a little bit. Let's do the other side as well, or let's test it out. So when thing moves all the way to the left, here he is in the woods, and he has no way of getting back to nevermore unless I click on the green flag, but he also won't go to the castle if I go all the way to the left. So as you can see, he doesn't go to the castle, and if I go all the way to the right, he doesn't go anywhere either. All right, so that's good so far. Okay, what's the next thing we want to tackle? I did mention I wanted the characters to say something, maybe when they show up. So let me click on Wednesday and let's go over to the castle area. Okay, so when Wednesday shows up, when she receives that message, go to castle, which is thing is going to be the sprite that's emitting or releasing that message or sending out that message. When she shows up, I want her to say something. So let's have her say, "How did you find me?" for 2 seconds. So let me test this out. Click the green flag. I'm going to move all the way to the left. And then she says, "How did you find me?" for 2 seconds. Okay, and Enid, on the other hand, is going to say, when we go to the woods, she's going to say, "It's nice." Actually, no, she's going to say, "Give me a massage." Because in the show, she did say that Thing gave good massages, apparently. As he might, because he looks like a very strong hand. Okay, so we have that. The next thing I want to tackle is making Thing look or face left and right. So let me go back to the character. So what I need to do is when I click on the left arrow, I want to make sure that this is the costume that is on. And when we click on the right arrow, we want to change Thing's costume. So I do have a video on costumes. I'll also put it in the description below. but I have to create that costume because I've never made it before. So this is thing. This is the costumes tab for the thing sprite. There's only one costume here. So I need to create another costume for thing. So I'm going to right click on them and I'm going to duplicate, and I'm going to rename this one to thing right. And then I'm going to just flip them horizontally. So that is a brand new costume that we can now use in the code, and that should be good. So let me rename the other one to thing left, just because I want to make sure that someone reading the code or looking through the code or the project can understand what's going on here. So we have thing left and we have thing right. And now we want to make sure that when we click on the left arrow, that's the costume that is showing. So that's probably the first thing I want to do before I even move or change its X or X position. I am going to switch the costume. When the left arrow is pressed, I'm going to make sure that he's facing left. And when the right arrow key is pressed, we're going to switch costume to thing right. So let me click on the green flag. And now when I click on the left and right arrow keys, he is facing in the correct direction. He's also kind of large, so I want to make him a little bit smaller, and that's something that I want to make sure he's always a specific size when the project starts. So what I'll do is I'm going to set his size right at the beginning, right when the green flag is clicked. I'm going to make sure that he is set to, let's say, 40% of his normal size, and that looks pretty good. But now he's a little bit high up, so let me bring him down here. And I can see that he's negative 136 on the y-axis. So I'm just going to change that in my code here to negative 136. So now when I click on the green flag, this is exactly where thing is going to start. All right, so now I can move left, and he shows up over here. Actually, you might notice that he's also up here in the air. Maybe when he moves over here, he shows up right over here at the top. So I could actually change that. When thing receives go to castle, I'm going to place him in the exact position that I want him to be. And that's 151.45. So let me change the code over here, 151 and 45. I can test this out by clicking the green flag, moving all the way to the left. And there he is exactly where I want him. And also, when I move all the way to the right, he shows up right there. I think that's fine. That works for me. Okay, so Enid said her piece, and as did Wednesday. Let me just right-click and clean up the blocks so that they're a little bit more clean instead of like being all over the place. And let me do that for everyone. Okay, so we are almost done here with what we're trying to accomplish. The last thing is I want to be able to go back to Nevermore. So I want thing to be able to turn around and go right back to Nevermore. So the idea here is it's very similar to my position, or sorry, my conditional over here. Let me actually move these down because this is actually tricky and it's going to be tricky to explain. I'm going to have a very similar conditional, except I only want to make sure that, let's see. Actually, hold on. This is the right arrow key. We don't want this one yet. We want to focus on the left arrow because right now I'm in the woods. So to get back to Nevermore from the woods, I have to click on the left arrow. So let me recreate or duplicate this condition, and we're going to change a few things. We want to go back to Nevermore only when the backdrop name is woods. Or what's it called exactly? Let me click on backdrops, and it is called woods, but with an uppercase W. So I got to go back to thing, and I want to make sure that we can detect the X position, or we only detect that when we are in the woods. So when that happens, I'm going to send out a broadcast. We go to events, and we're going to create a brand new broadcast called Back to Nevermore. Back to Nevermore. Yeah, we'll go with that. And we'll use this broadcast also when thing is in the castle. So back to Nevermore. And it's actually interesting because we can check, right after we check if the backdrop is Nevermore, we could also check to see if the backdrop is Woods. So in the left arrow key, right now, thing can move all the way to the left, and I think this should work. Actually, we're not going to see anything because Back to Nevermore is not being detected by any other sprite or the backdrop or the stage. So let me actually add some code first. Let me go to the stage, and when we receive the message Back to Nevermore, the brand new message, we are going to switch the backdrop to Nevermore. So for all intents and purposes, going back to Nevermore is going to be almost the equivalent of clicking on the green flag. So that message is going to do almost the same thing. Okay, now that the code is there, we should be able to move thing to the left, and he should go back to Nevermore. But you might notice that we see a couple of bugs. One is that Enid is still showing up. So Enid, when she receives Back to Nevermore, she should also hide. So let me go over to the events palette inside of Enid. And when Enid receives Back to Nevermore, she is also going to hide. And the other thing is when Thing receives Back to Nevermore, right now he's on the left side. Let's put him back in the middle. Okay, so when Thing receives Back to Nevermore, we are going to make sure that he shows up right at the same position that he started, which was 0, -136. So when I receive Back to Nevermore, Thing is going to go back to 0, -136. We're just going to enter that manually. Okay, so let me test out the right side. So right now, Thing is here in the beginning. He's going to go all the way to the right and meet up with Enid. She says, give me a massage, and he's going to go right back to Nevermore and end up in the middle. And that's exactly what we want. So now we just have to do the other side. So Thing goes all the way to the other side. Wednesday says, how did you find me? And now Thing can go to the right and go back to Nevermore. So here, when the right arrow key is pressed, this is where we want to check. And we want to create a very similar conditional. So I'm going to duplicate it by right-clicking on it. I'm going to connect it underneath the previous conditional. And we're only going to check when the backdrop name equals Castle2. That's the only time that we're going to send Thing or broadcast the message back to Nevermore. So I have to change that broadcast and make sure that I don't miss anything like this. Otherwise, we're going to have some bugs. But I think that should work now, because when I click on the right arrow key and send him back, he shows up at Nevermore. And we have the same bug that we saw with Enid, and you can see Wednesday is here. So we have to go back to Wednesday, and when Wednesday receives the message back to Nevermore, she has to hide. So we're going to go back to the looks palette, and we're going to hide Wednesday when she receives Back to Nevermore. And I think that should work. So when she receives that message, Thing will be in the middle. Wednesday is going to disappear. All right, let me just click Save Now and click on the green flag to test it out. So Thing can go all the way to the left. She says, how did you find me? He can go back to Nevermore. And then he can go all the way to the right. And Enid says, give me a massage. So we got it working. So now we have different characters in different backdrops. And we have one main sprite that can move between all three backdrops. So I hope this video was helpful. I hope it was fun. And if you haven't watched the show yet, do check it out, because it's actually it's a fun one. Hopefully this was helpful, Shoba, and I will see you all in the next one.